I'm a believer that this team's going to win the national championships.
The rivalries, it's up there on top of the list, man. And if we allow them to devalue it, we lose a lot of what makes college football special. Don't let them do it. Don't let them devalue what it means to you. When we talk about guys who don't live up to the hype, I don't want it to sound like I am trashing these guys. That's not my intention, because it's not them who walked in the door and said, this is what I'm going to be. It's other people, it's adults who evaluated them and put all this hype on them. They didn't put the hype on themselves. Some of these guys, you know, they had solid careers. They just didn't live up to what we thought. And that's why I don't want to use the word like these guys busted out, because some of these guys did, end up finishing their career somewhere else or end up not finishing their college career at all. Some of these guys had a solid college career. It just wasn't anything like I expected. And again, this is my list. Your list will be different. And my list is, skewed a lot towards guys that I personally, we all have guys that we attach to in the freshman class when they come in, and we're like, yeah, that's the one I like. I like this guy too. And we talk about the ones that we really like. We kind of buy stock in them. And if their career pans out, we pat ourselves on the back and tell everybody, yeah, he was one of mine. I was on him early. And there is a fella here at number 12 that I was in on early. And boy, the freshman season validated me. And that is Jamal Berry, a running back out of Florida, big time recruit, 5-star, number 3 running back in the class. I thought he was going to be so good. And then he came in and rushed for 7 yards a carry as a freshman. And it looked like we had ourselves a dude. And then some weird stuff started happening, man. He assaulted somebody on campus. The professor or something, when it happened, was talking about him being like weird, out of his mind, couldn't remember his name. Then he had some drug charges after that. Anyway, ends up transferring out. and that was that with Jamal Berry. But wow, that is a guy that I thought was going to have an amazing career. Superly highly rated out of high school. And then he came and actually proved it on the field at 7 yards a clip. Obviously a big one for me. So that's my number 12. I'm going to throw in 2 accomplished Ohio State backs in here with him, both from Florida as well. Guys that I thought would be a heck of a lot better than they ended up being, and ended up having, fine Ohio State careers, but not to the level that I thought. One of them, Maurice Wells. He was the number 4 running back in the country, 5'9", 180, expected to be some kind of, shifty blazer. He was not. He was not a shifty blazer. He was a guy who played a lot of football at Ohio State, and his average yards per carry was about 3.5 for his career, which is really, really low for a guy to play that much football at Ohio State. And another one who, again, solid dude, solid Buckeye, but Lydell Ross, brought in by John Cooper to replace Eddie George, did not work out that way. Ends up playing for Tress, gets supplanted by 5-star freshman Maurice Clarett. Then, of course, we have Clarett for 1 year. Lydell Ross is the starter again. And again, Lydell Ross had 2 more years after Clarett as the leading rusher at Ohio State. Both of them just just under mid, man, just under mid. And he was a really highly rated back, and I thought he was going to be really good. He looks great in a uniform, but averaged less than 4 yards a carry in his career. All right, number 11. This is a running back who, to me, had high school film that is some of the best I've seen from a running back in the last probably, 20 years. It is up there with the best of the best. Granted, the competition wasn't great in the state of Indiana, but at 6'2", 225 in high school, fast as lightning, physical, strong, Rod Smith looked like he was going to be, this was the next Eddie. He really looked like that. He was rated like that. And he was so good and so physically gifted that he had a pretty lousy career at Ohio State and ended up playing in the NFL for several years, backing up Zeke for the Cowboys at one point. And when he would get in the game, he was good. He was an NFL back, an NFL dude who was just a bit of a bonehead, man. He was a bit of a bonehead, and he fumbled the ball, and it just never worked out. But what a talent. I thought he was going to be so big. Number 10, personal for me, man. This one hits close to home. And he played 4 years at Ohio State, a solid career by any measure. But Dante Booker Jr. was the number one linebacker coming out of high school, 5-star Mr. Everything, 2-time state champion at my alma mater. Him and Paris Campbell on the same field together. It was Dante Booker that stood out as the 5-star every game. Dante Booker Jr., his dad was just enormous, played at Auburn. Everything about Dante Booker, his arms, I mean, they were so long. He was so fast and instinctive and laid the wood. You could not have convinced me that that kid wasn't going to be an All-American. You just couldn't have. He was so dominant and, just pretty mid, and I could never understand why. Number 9, the reason kids from Ohio are no longer allowed to get the number 1 defensive lineman rating in the country, and that is Rob Rose, man. Rob Rose, another guy who did some good things at Ohio State, but Robert Rose was the number 1 defensive tackle in the country. And coming out of Glenville with that nasty attitude and the pipeline and the guys that have come from Glenville, when Rob Rose came rolling into Ohio State, we all thought that it was on. We thought we had a monster. Didn't turn out to be that way. He makes my list because I was so high on him personally. At number 9, how about Torrance Gibson, man? Torrance Gibson, as a 5-star athlete, a quarterback in high school. He played in Florida. Was it Hermitage or Heritage? Maybe Heritage. Let me check that. I got to double check that. Yes, American Heritage, Brandon Innes' high school. But coming in, big battle with Miami. Buckeyes win the recruitment. He comes in, and, it looked like you got another potential TP here. Not obviously rated like that or quite as big or thick, but the athlete he was, the attitude he had, it was brash. It was Miami, and we had him at Ohio State, and it just felt like a different kind of swagger. The excitement was through the roof. Ends up switching to wide receiver, then getting suspended and signing with a JUCO, and then he ends up at Cincinnati, and nothing really ever comes of his career. But I certainly thought that he was going to be a dude, and that was a big disappointment for me. At number 7, Justin Zwick, man. Justin Zwick started off at Orville. I didn't hear about him till he got to Massillon, and boy, that junior and senior year at Massillon, around here in Northeast Ohio, this guy was talked about like he was going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, just stopping by Ohio State to win a couple national championships and a Heisman. And the story of his career, really interesting. We've since got to hear him talk about it, and he talks about it in a very open and honest way. They told him they were not going to take another quarterback in the class, and then they take Troy Smith at the very end. And Troy Smith obviously just was a better quarterback. Zwick still played in 24 games. He stuck it out. That's awesome. He's a Buckeye. This day and age, that doesn't happen. Back then, you had to sit out a year, which was a big deal, so you didn't really transfer much. Like we look at Aaron Noland, he stuck around for 1 year. Julian saying, same kind of situation, although it was a transfer portal, but they told Air, we're only going to take you, and you bring in another quarterback. Air eventually leaves, and that was the same situation Zwick had essentially. But, he competed his butt off. He just never was anywhere near the quarterback that I think a lot of us thought he was going to be. Coming out of Massillon, the prolific high school career, he kind of had the prototypical everything you were looking for at the time, and it never was to be. At number 6, a guy I really like, man, Julian Fleming. Julian Fleming definitely makes the list as the number 1 wide receiver in the country. He's huge. He's athletic. Not long ago, we were reading his high school scout report, and Steve Wiltfong had written it. And talking about jumping out of the gym in basketball, 360s and windmills and the crazy athleticism. Obviously, he gets injured several times at Ohio State. And we never, I don't think, got to see that kind of athleticism out of him. Really nothing close. But he blocked a lot, man. Everybody really liked him. He was a good Buckeye. He transfers to Penn State. And at the time, I think a lot of us thought, all right, he's going to be their number 1 guy. I think he had less than 200 yards receiving. Somehow got signed on to play for the Bengals for the Packers, or signed on to their practice squad here. and just got cut because he couldn't pass a physical. So I hate putting the guy on here. I do. But we're talking about a number 1 overall wide receiver who turned into that, 200 yards in his final year of high school. That is a big disappointment. At number 5, a blast from the past, man. Louis Irizarry, a 5-star, the best tight end we've ever had out of high school at Ohio State. I think he was the number 2 tight end in the country out of Youngstown, Ursuline. Was he out of Ursuline? I think it was Ursuline. He flips from Miami. So he originally committed to Miami. 6'5", 225 to 250. Got himself arrested for a robbery. Got himself arrested for an assault, all while at Ohio State. Obviously gets pounded out. Ends up going to prison for I don't know. He got a 3-year sentence. I think he served 6 months. Ends up at Youngstown State and then and washes out of the sport. But we're talking about a guy that people were comparing to Kellen Winslow. And obviously that didn't pan out. But I do think he even made a practice squad. He was so naturally talented. He might have made the Bengals practice squad at some point. But super bust. At number 4, oh, buddy, Sammy Maldonado, man. Sammy Maldonado out of the Bronx, one of the best running backs in the country, top 2 running backs in the country. Comes in as a freshman, and literally coming out of spring, this dude was pushing for number 1 reps against Johnny Wells when he was a senior. Obviously, that's huge, right, for a kid that age. Size, power, speed. And it just it never looked like that when he was carrying the ball at Ohio State, which didn't happen much before he ended up transferring to Maryland after 2 years and not doing much there either. But a huge hype machine coming in with Sammy Maldonado. Number 3 for me, got to be Tate, baby. Tate Martell, Bishop Gorman quarterback. Kid was on Netflix in high school. Number 4 quarterback in the class, top 50 overall prospect, big personality, really cocky, rich family. It created a lot of hard opinions on him on one side or the other. A lot of people hated him. A lot of people loved him. Now, he was a small dude, and he had a bit of a weak arm. I couldn't understand the hype, but I figured that there are so many educated people that I must just be missing something. I just must be missing it. And if they want him at Ohio State, maybe he's that dude. When Justin Fields was considering leaving Georgia because it was clear Jake Fromm was entrenched as the starter, he entered the transfer, well, not the transfer portal, but he was talking about transferring. And Tate Martell famously tweeted, "Word of advice, don't swing and miss, especially your second time," which was, he was trying to deter him from coming. Of course, Justin Fields comes. Tate also said something like, why would I leave? Why would I leave for someone who hasn't put a single second into the program? So really unfortunate for Tate. Fields comes, Tate leaves, ends up going to Miami, goes to Miami, and we just assume, all right, let's see what he's got. And I don't know about you, but I was excited to see what he's got at Miami. He gets beat out by a freshman. Then he transfers to UNLV. Dude never could even play there. Goes back home to Vegas and couldn't play there. So for a guy with that kind of hype coming out of high school to never even be able to play anywhere, pretty sad story. At number 2 for your boy here, Mike DeAndrea, man. Mike DeAndrea, and it ain't all his fault. Guy had a lot of injuries, but Mike DeAndrea was the number 1 linebacker in the class. And the fact that he comes in with Bobby Carpenter, who was a blue chip recruit, and AJ Hawk, who was not, and what those two became. And DeAndrea was the dude that was supposed to be the next Katzenmoyer, 6'3", 230, number 1 linebacker in the country. Guy dinged up a lot, but really, even when he was on the field, he never looked like that kind of guy to me. So that one stung. At number 1 for your boy here, man. This is a guy that I thought had top 5 NFL draft potential. This is a guy that I think Urban Meyer felt the same way about. And it was, for me, so much about how Urban talked about him that made me feel like the hype was totally justified. This guy was a freak. And number 1 on my biggest disappointments list at Ohio State is Noah Spence. Noah Spence was obviously a 5-star, the number 1 defensive lineman in the country, played 12 games as a freshman, played 13 games as a sophomore, 50 tackles, 8 sacks as a sophomore. Then he was suspended for MDMA, failed another drug test, and the Big Ten made him ineligible. Could never play in the Big Ten again, which I've never really heard before or since. Dude was so talented, he goes down to Eastern Kentucky and gets picked in round 2. So pick number 39 overall, which is borderline a first rounder out of Eastern Kentucky. That's how talented he was. Wins the defensive rookie of the month in the NFL. Kicked around for a couple years. Had he started at Ohio State for years 3 and 4, guy could have been a top 5 pick. Could have been something really, really special. I don't know if he had a drug problem or if he just had a couple unfortunate slip-ups at the wrong time, which can happen as well. But man, oh man, Noah Spence for me was the one that I was most heartbroken about. So that's my list. I, of course, have some honorable mentions, and I'm sure you're probably thinking of several of my honorable mentions right now. And maybe you got a problem with some of the guys I put on there, but I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Let me know who your list is. If you got a couple that stand out that you want me to add, I'll talk about them on the next show in the comments. But an interesting discussion, and I think it's always cool to then look at the flip side of this as well, and that is the guys who come in with little to no fanfare and end up becoming that dude. So I got a little list on those guys as well. So guys that came in who were not supposed to be that guy, who were, 3-star, not much. How about Devin Smith? Devin Smith was a 3-star, the number 55 wide receiver in the country, ends up becoming one of the best long ball catchers we've ever seen at Ohio State. Obviously, we got the ones that we all talk about all the time. Whenever anybody talks about a 3-star, Chris Olave gets brought up. James Laurinaitis gets brought up. How about Malcolm Jenkins? Was also a 3-star, the number 58 cornerback in the country. Brian Robisky was the number 61 wide receiver in the country. Santonio Holmes was a 3-star. Chimdi Chekwa was a 3-star. Bradley Roby was a 3-star, the number 42 corner. Jonathan Hankins was the 500th ranked player in the country, a 3-star. BB Landers was a 3-star, the number 680th player in the country. And how about the 5-stars that absolutely were that dude, that were everything they were supposed to be? Teddy Ginn, number 2 overall, definitely lived up to all the hype. Beanie Wells, the number 1 running back in the country, definitely lived up to the hype. TP definitely lived up to the hype, in my opinion. Obviously, we would have loved to win a national championship with him, but he certainly lived up to the hype to me. Devere Posey, wide receiver number 3 in the class, he lived up to it. Jeff Okudah, Chase Young, all lived up to the hype. Garrett lived up to the hype. So, fun little exercise. You guys let me know your thoughts, man.